professor told me, Tanya, it doesn't matter. And you remember that Borodino was the battle with French army. He said, Tanya, it doesn't matter. 2 French more, 2 French less, and Borodino battle. That's the beautiful example of the man with a good humor. So it was difficult to work, and I remember one day I made 4 Kremlins. So it was, it is like slavery, the first season. But then, at the same time, tourists gave us excellent education because they arranged so many lectures for us. They arranged even the tours all over the country. And but lecturing was just almost every winter. But then tourism was so popular to Russia, then we started to have non-stop seasons. Because nowadays, in winter time, I used to work in winter with exhibitions because I had my connections with businessmen. Because I also had a break in my career when for 8 years I worked with businessmen. But at that time, somewhere in the second part of the 70s, we had so many tourists that we worked all the year round. And there was a lot of tourists. I do remember the traffic from England. Could never forget that. Thompson, and then it was Thompson Tours, and also the groups which were arranged by IML in Tourist Moscow Limited, because we were so clever that in 1929 we bought the travel company in England, and it started to work in the 60s and 70s mostly, and we had so many charter flights from England, because that was the time whenever they had the travel allowance, when they couldn't spend more than £50 abroad. And in tourists was so smart that they arranged the tours for £50, because that was the tour for 3 days to Moscow, the same for 3 days to St Petersburg, different tours. And if they came to Moscow for 3 days, they stayed at the tourist hotel, which stood exactly on the place of just Ritz-Carlton, and 3 meals a day. Even if they were lousy meals, there were 3 meals a day. And then just the sightseeing to the Kremlin and and sightseeing of the city. Then the ticket to the Bolshoi and the ticket to the circus for £50. And you know why it was profitable to tourists? Because they paid to Russian organizations in rubles, and they played on the difference of the currency, the value of the currency in rubles, because the country at that time was accumulating foreign currency. So it was profitable. They used to buy not expensive tickets to the Bolshoi, not expensive tickets to the, tickets to the circus. And as for guides, who pays them? So because we used to have salaries in the Soviet time much lower than engineers, and maybe just the same like doctors, because the doctors were also and teachers, they were also paid very low salaries. But that was the good education. We all got that in tourists. So Zina just very modestly said that she went to the best college of foreign languages in Moscow. And I just simply lived in St Petersburg at that time, and I went to the university. We also had a very good linguistical school. But, just when I was a student, very often I skipped lessons, and I preferred cinema, and we all had the boyfriends and everything. So we were not some of the students studied so well that they got the so-called red diplomas or red certificates. Red certificates mean that you got all excellent marks there. We got just the certificate, and there is an application which is the list of all your examinations. We don't have to show that when we're looking for jobs. Now they do, yes. But we, both of us, ты тоже красного диплома не имел, да? We didn't have the red certificates, but enjoyed our students' life, which was more important. Also, when I studied, I remember our first experience, because we had two very good teachers. They were both, one of them was English, because she stayed in Russia when her husband was, her husband was very revolutionary minded and he was executed by English. She stayed in Russia, then her only son was arrested by Stalin. But she stayed with us and we loved her. She was teaching us how to pronounce the words and everything. So at that time we didn't have the tape recorders was so large and it was so difficult, and the room where we listened to all these English texts was so cold. So I could imitate, I think, just all the languages, even Chinese, so she loved me. And one day when she met me in the Armory chamber, she came up and in front of the American group said how lousy my pronunciation was. Now, but I just remembered that case because at that time we couldn't listen, we couldn't see English films, we couldn't see anything. It was very difficult to listen to the just the radio, because our radio sets, if they had short waves, we could listen to BBC or Voice of America. But at the same time, our stations used to do everything just to make it impossible to listen to that. And we had to buy we could buy the newspaper. The only newspaper which was available at that time was just the Daily Worker. That was the communist newspaper. And we had to bribe the man who was selling this newspaper in front of Europe Hotel, because even that was difficult. So we tried to use every opportunity to talk to the foreigner. And I remember how it was the visit of the English battleship to Leningrad. And the battleship was standing in the Neva River in front of the first bridge, because it was so high, but it was impossible for just to go to the palace square or to the Hermitage. But so it stood at the beginning. It was not far away from our university. And we decided to go and to have a look. And we looked, and the battleship was so big, so we watched how the sailors worked. And all of a sudden, one of the sailors fell. And it was not very high, but just we watched that. And then we decided that it would be a very good excuse for us if we come late for our lessons of English in the morning. So I remember that we just came into the classroom, and the teacher asked me, "Why are you so late?" And I said, we went to see the English battleship, and it was such a tragedy there. One of the sailors fell from the top. She looked at me and she knew my talent of telling stories, and she said, "Oh, that is of course a very tragic event. Do you remember by chance, what was he crying when he was falling down?" And that was the trouble for me. I looked at her and very honestly said, "Save our souls." And then she said, "Next time you have to learn that everybody, in all languages, when people have some pain, they just scream only one word, Mama." Ladies and gentlemen, you know that in Stalin's time, when in 1937 there were just most severe persecutions of people, when just more than 1 million were killed, just were shot down by troikas, by just 3 people, they just had death penalty. So there were so many arrests of people, incredible number of arrests of people, and at the same time KGB, you had to write some kind of just in what they accused them. So the most popular was espionage, and the spies were from 3 countries. I don't know, could never understand why. Poland, England, and Germany. America was far away, so we expected that there was less spies from America. So incredible, just incrimination, crimes were incriminated to them. So one of the most popular was, one of the men was accused that he was digging the tunnel between Moscow and London. And imagine, just one person was digging the tunnel between Moscow and London. And it is, a lot of people recognized everything because they were dreaming about that moment when they would be killed, because torturing was terrible. So we, at the moment, that just digging the tunnel between the boat and the Kremlin and Tretyakov Gallery. And we should say that Tuesday is the most difficult day, Tuesday and Friday, because on Tuesday some people do not return to their work on Monday because they have some special agreements, and they work on Saturday and then return back only on Tuesday morning. So a lot of people do. But the only way out of the situation, I think, is to develop the other cities, to attract people to other cities.
Yesterday when we went into the metro, someone asked me how many I usually lose on this tour. Well, now we make it very easy, but we learned, you know, quite a long itinerary, but to fit it into the city tour, we have to make it short and only a few stations. But on a longer sort of tour to the metro, once I lost one woman. It was a large American group. And, you know, I think I didn't know until the morning. So the leader of the group, you know, came up to me and said, you know, Zina, you lost my sister. And, well, I said, really? And he said, don't worry, I have another one. So, you know, sense of humor is the only thing that might help us today. Well, certainly today you won't feel like we're torturing you for very long. Well, let's hope that this stretch of the street will be, of the way, will be faster. Because this, you know, here more or less the street was already widened. They built some, you know, flyovers. Used to have the gardens in the middle of this road, so they had to remove them to make, you know, the road wider. So this is Leningrad Prospect. Two identical buildings to the right belong to Airflot. Airflot used to be a monopoly, you know, air company in Russia. We didn't have anyone else, and now they have some rivals. There are some other air companies that exist, but still Airflot is the largest air company. From the boat to the city center, about 20 kilometers. By the way, problem with traffic was one of the reasons why Moscow lost to be the host of Olympics in 2012. Our mayor, Lushkov, tried to show that we can use the river, you know, to go around the city. Well, it didn't convince the International Olympic Committee. But, you know, they should think about the ways, really, of how you get around in the city. So many cars. Every year they say they're selling about 300,000 cars. Well, let's see, we won the Winter Olympics. In Moscow, we were talking about 2014 Sochi Winter Olympics. A beautiful sport. Well, they talk a lot about Sochi now, that, well, it will be so good for us because we are going to build the, international skiing resort, and that will attract more tourists because, compared to such classical countries of tourism as Spain, Italy, we don't receive many. We only have in the whole of Russia 5 million, and I'm sure that figure includes the visitors from former republics. And the number of people, well, really is not a big figure. Which is a pity because, in many countries it makes a lot of, brings quite a good capital to the countries. Spain, in Spain, 1/3 of their revenues is for tourism. And in Russia we're far away from it. I think not enough is done really. They don't think about, well, even the situation with toilets, it's kind of national tragedy in Russia, public toilets. Certainly it's not our great achievement. But you see, in the years of perestroika, the paid toilets appeared, and it could have been very good business if you think, in terms of money. Unfortunately, at the railway stations, and we're passing by, Belaruski again. Yes, I wanted, well, let's forget the subject of the toilets. Old Believers Church, we passed it every time. So we'll talk in the museum. Well, I hope we still have some time left for the gallery itself. So this church was built in 1907. And it's Old Believers, and out of great number of Christian churches, they're mostly Russian Orthodox, as you know, all the Kremlin churches, because these people were persecuted, and they were only recognized at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. Now it is recognized, they have their own patriarch elected, and more or less we can, while you see, Old Believers, when they were not recognized by official government and official church, because the Russian Orthodox Church till the revolution time was not separated from the state. It was a state religion here. So the Old Believers, I forgot the thought, a deep thought I had. I think it's the the result of this very long drive. Well, you see, the Old Believers were really persecuted, and they left the big cities. And this is the period in history, well, in profound histories of Russia, it's called the Great Schism. There were other sects that appeared. Some of them were called Raskolniki. Raskolniki, well, could be translated as splitters. So they split from the mainstream church, from the they were persecuted, but at the beginning, in the 17th century, in protest against these new sort of rules, new reforms, they got together and burned themselves down, as to protest against the changes. And in the museum we're going to see a huge painting by Surikov. A lady in the sledge with very pale face is holding two fingers like that. Well, that means that she was going to pray and make a holy sign with two fingers and not three, as Nikon recommended, because three means Trinity, and he thought it was very important. Well, he started, saying, he was probably right, patriarch. He said, rewriting those Bibles, Gospels, people made a lot of mistakes. So we'll correct the church books, And when they started those corrections, he found somewhere that this was a deviation from Byzantine roots of our church, and he started to change all these things, and people resisted the change. So it's a very picturesque picture depicting Russia of the 17th century. So in the 19th century, at the end of the century, we had painters whose choice was Russian history. So Surikov was one of those, and he painted this beautiful painting, Boyaranya Morozov, that's the name of the lady, who died of starvation. They put her in a dungeon and were watching how this lady was dying there. And the title, Boya, means that she belonged to nobility. There were only 200 families in Russia that had the title Boya. So now we have to make it through Tverskaya. Did you all learn the name of the street? Yes, Tverskaya, and always, well, here we have, like the other side is fine now. Maybe you will be lucky, but once, the same situation, like your boat today leaves Moscow, I think it's going to be 5:30 if you all make it back from Arbat. Yes, well, we parked, for some reason it wasn't Arbat, but people wanted to spend more time around Red Square. So we parked the bus near Metropole Hotel. And it took me 2 hours to drive back from Metropole, that's from the Bolshoi. And we were not making it. So the last 25 past 5, we left the bus and crossed that highway underneath, and people just, ran to the boat. Well, of course, we had 2 bus loads, like 80 people. They wouldn't leave without them. But you see this, and the first day the first day was easy, that's clear. But yesterday, no, it was the previous cruise that came back from. It only took us half an hour on Friday afternoon. You see, you never know with traffic. It was difficult to leave Red Square because we couldn't park in that parking place where we parked the buses yesterday. It took us half an hour, to call the buses, to put people on the buses, and then only half an hour to drive back, or maybe even less, slightly less than that. So all kinds of experiences. When they close the tunnel, maybe we should start writing the books on those rides. Not only to tell you stories, but also this building, by the way, was moved backwards 100 meters to open up Izvestia newspaper. Well, it was about 20 years ago. We could actually see on the tours how it was shifted. At that time, we didn't have these smaller structures with blue roofs. They wanted to show a new building of Izvestia, a big newspaper. It had, almost the same circulation as Pravda, and the joke was that there is no truth in Pravda, it was translated, and no news in Izvestia. Izvestia is news and Pravda is truth. So Pravda was the newspaper of the Communist Party, and Izvestia was sort of published by Council of Ministers. It was published by the government. Pushkin is still here. There were some more chains, closer to the statue. They were stolen by the people who are looking for metal to sell it, and get some money. Recently it was reported. Well, you can already see the silhouettes of the Kremlin towers in this place where it now has a strange sign, Hotel 24 Ru. We had an old bakery very famous bakery was recently closed, and they have coffee bean, nice coffee is sold there, not very expensively. And well, you can see this bit of Tverskaya that we drove many times here. And the exact time and temperature on Central Telegraph Office. Temperature in centigrade, I think it's at 21. Strange as it is. It seemed cooler. But you know, Moscow is so big that you can even... Well, as for the weather extremes, we really have, well, winters are very different. Recently, you know, they have become milder, but I remember the eve of 1979, when we were still working for Intourist, we had minus 40 centigrade a week by the New Year Eve. And I remember we had a big American group staying in Ukraine Hotel, one of Stalin's skyscrapers, and we went to the Kremlin on those public buses because they were the only ones running. Other, you know, tourist buses, they were all stuck. And well, we took people through the Kremlin. You know that you have to walk inside, outside. We come to the bus, and one lady says, "I miss my husband." So it was awful to leave someone, you know, in this temperature in the street, but it was you know, how difficult it would be to look for someone in the Kremlin. Well, I didn't know what to do, you know, I sort of panicked, so we made another round, and he came out at this moment of that same gate where we left the Kremlin with another group. So we rescued the person, we didn't let him freeze in Moscow. And I remember, you know, one of the hottest summers was 1972. We had 3 months temperatures, you know, over 30, 31, 32. Well, not 40. We never had, well, we have an argument sometimes, you know. We don't agree with us. I think I'm more accurate with figures, though. I insist. So, well, believe me, believe me that even 31 is pretty warm for Moscow. Practically no houses with air conditioning. Here we had in tourist hotel. It was like gas chamber. They have little windows in small rooms. They plan to have air conditioning. After all, you know, they changed their mind. They built it without air conditioning. And I spent only one night there. I remember it till today. It was really terrible. So it was so hot and no rains that peat around this Moscow, we have a lot of peat. It's burning all the time, but there were already fires, you know, serious fires. And in the city we had the smoke. It hurt your eyes. I remember that we looked, let's say, well, there was no gate, but from this end of Red Square you couldn't see St. Basil. It was so smoky. So we lived through some extremes. Well, today the temperature is normal. I think you were quite lucky because it's much more comfortable. They promise for Saturday plus 30. It will warm up. Well, some people that spend their time at their dachas, they probably will be very happy, but to, you know, for the work, for sightseeing, I think this is more comfortable. Well, as we agreed yesterday, as long as it doesn't rain on us. Karl Marx monument, a monument to Karl Marx. So not all communist propaganda was removed from Moscow streets. And we even have a friend of Karl Marx, Friedrich Engels, still standing in one of the places. They are not together. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. You know that Marx didn't have money. So if it were not for Friedrich Engels, he would never be able to write his Das Kapital in London. So Friedrich really helped. And some people, you know, the people that are very critical about the revolution and all this terrible time that Russia had to spend, you know, trying to get to that bright future, communist society, they blame it on Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. They started it all because they are regarded as founders of scientific communism.
Yes, we've got our own local team, Lokomotiv. They were the champions of Russia 3 times, but not nowadays. But still, ice hockey is extremely popular among the kids. And nowadays we have 3 ice palaces, and even the biggest is called as Arena 2000. It's a very big sport and cultural place for doing sport, for ice hockey, and also for different concerts. So we don't need just to go to Moscow or to St. Petersburg to enjoy the voices of our favorite singers and groups. By the way, we've got here Smokey, and we've got here Scorpions, and so different other groups from America, heavy metal group. I forgot its name. So to your left, it is a very huge mighty walls of the Monastery of Transfiguration. They'll be the stop at the end of our tour. It's a very big cultural area. It's not an active monastery with different departments, icon department and nature and history department and so on and so forth. And inside you have some time on your own, and also we'll visit very beautiful ancient cathedral of Transfiguration, the oldest in Yaroslavl of the 16th century. So, dear ladies and gentlemen, to your left that's Epiphany Square with the monument to Yaroslav the Wise. Later on you'll have an opportunity to take pictures of this place. And now we are moving along the downtown of Yaroslavl, the historical part of it, and it is well kept, well preserved with beautiful architecture, 2 or 3 storied buildings. To your left we are passing by merchants' arches or merchant stores of the 18th century, and we'll have an opportunity to see another square. All the central squares in Yaroslavl are very attractive, and I've mentioned that Yaroslavl is a very big cultural area. We've got several cinema halls, even a circus, several theaters, and even jazz music center. Jazz music is very popular here in Yaroslavl. We have a special festival, Jazz Over the Volga River. We have an artist exhibition hall and a concert hall with organ, so we can enjoy even organ music. And Yaroslavl is the motherland of the first Russian professional theater. So in front of you, that is Theater Square of Yaroslavl with the Volkov Theater. This place is known, the building, because the theater was started by the merchant Fyodor Volkov. The monument to him you can find to your left among the trees. The only monument to the father of the theater is located in Yaroslavl. The building itself, it's typical classical style of architecture, decorated with molding from Greek mythology, and the building itself belongs to the early 20th century. And now we'll move along the boulevard, the park, the former part of the fortifications that protected our city from the northwest. Its favorite place for all the people, and in Yaroslavl it is known as Broadway. Favorite meeting place for young people here, and different over there even you can find a statue of bear, the bear with the bad legs, our coat of arms, and the metal fence again. Here they are going to build a museum and shopping center. Nowadays Yaroslavl is look as if very big shopping area, and more people's apartments are being built nowadays. Of course it's very good because we had problem during several years, but they are all private and they are very expensive, I should say. So in comparison with other provincial cities, Yaroslavl looks more prosperous because different reasons. 64% of our population works for industrial enterprises, heavy industry we have with the leading of chemical, machine building, and engineering. We've got 2,000 different plants, factories, enterprises here, and 20 are the biggest. For example, oil refining, dyes and varnishes, which produces dyes and varnishes for our Russian cars. Then we have tire, motor, diesel enterprises, even repairing of train carriages and locomotives, because Yaroslavl is also the headquarters of the Northern Railroads, and it is a part of Trans-Siberian Railroad. Via Yaroslavl you can go to the northern lands, Arkhangelsk, Murmansk, and to the Far East. It will take you approximately 7-8 days by train. And we have here 2 car bridges and 1 rail bridge of 1913, so one of the oldest, and it was the only one on the Upper Volga. And of course during the Second World War it was very important for the Nazi troops to destroy such a bridge, the only part that linked 2 banks, I mean the central part and the northern part of Russia. The Nazi troops never occupied Yaroslavl, but our city was bombed very heavily from the air, thanks to the industry. Before the Second World War, according to the new plan of industrialization by Stalin, here 3 biggest enterprises were set up: automobile, synthetic rubber. For the first time in the world, synthetic rubber was produced here in Yaroslavl, and then later on in the United States of America. And the third enterprise was tire enterprise, the biggest in Europe. Even nowadays, while building the new houses, people find bombs in the ground, and some of them are real very dangerous. So, dear ladies and gentlemen, that's another part of Yaroslavl. It's also the central part is considered to be, and to your right you can find a very beautiful estate, and this is our very old tobacco factory with the trademark as Balkan Star. So we are just near the place of our destination. I suppose you'll enjoy the small kids. They are very nice, and I'm sure they've prepared different surprises for you. So that's why prepare your cameras and your smiles. The school with special deep learning of foreign languages, they should teach 2 languages from the 1st grade and then from the 5th grade. So we have only 1 school with deep learning of German, and also in the United States of America. It's Berlin.
They don't know what's going on.
Yeah, they don't know. Who are these people?
Вкусные 2 пряничка. А давайте пробуем. Давайте быстрее. Давайте быстрее пирожочка.
Just for play. Yeah.
Пойдемте в кружочек, пойдем. Мы сейчас вам и споем, и спрячем. Давайте-ка, ну-ка, давайте в кружочек. Сонечка. А сейчас мы будем так. Ванюша, подойди ко мне, пожалуйста. Так, ну-ка пошире кружочек. Давайте красивый кружочек сделаем. Красиво. Так, давайте.
Пойдемте дальше, тогда пусть они играют.
Веселый гуся, один серый, другой белый, два веселых гуся. Один серый, другой белый, два веселых гуся. Ручки на пояс поставим. Знаете, вы там вытянули шеи, у кого длиннее. Один серый, другой белый, у кого длиннее. Давайте ножки приготовили. Мыли гуси лапки, лужи у канавки. Один серый, другой белый, спрятались от бабки.
Сейчас маленькие, потому что нет, сейчас потому что нет, мы будем в выпусках. А так у нас маленькие нет.
On your left, you can see the red building that belongs to our candy factory. In this city, we produce all good things in life, as people say, all kinds of temptations. For gentlemen, for example, there is a brewery that makes very good beer. There is a distillery that makes vodka, and there is a tobacco factory. For ladies, there is a candy factory. On the whole, well, a lot of industry in the city. Olga has already told you about it. A lot of heavy industry, a lot of chemical industry, a big oil refinery, and now the industry is in quite a good condition. The unemployment rate is very low in this city, about 2% only. So you can stay in our city, you'll find a job here easily. Well, but of course, if you are by profession a teacher or a doctor, we won't recommend you to stay in this city because you'll be paid from the state mostly, because our systems of education and healthcare are still 90% state systems, and it means you won't be paid a lot. On your right, you recognize now the beautiful chapel of Alexander Nevsky, a beautiful imitation of old Russian style of architecture, though the chapel was only constructed a bit more than 100 years ago. And also on your right, a bit in the distance, you can see a huge white building of the regional administration. Probably you know that Russia is divided into 89 regions, and Yaroslavl is the center of one of such regions. So there is region of Yaroslavl, and our region is one of the smallest in size in Russia, but still it's bigger than some of European countries. For example, it is bigger than Belgium, for example, or Holland. Well, but in Russia, the region of Yaroslavl is one of the smallest, and we have a governor for the region of Yaroslavl, and we have a mayor for the city of Yaroslavl. So this is politically the situation in our city. So on your right, office of the governor. Well, and another building on your right, white building close to the bus, it belongs to our university, the State University of Yaroslavl, one of the buildings, the administrative building. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see today, well, we have some problems in our city with traffic. Central streets in the city are packed with traffic, but we have very experienced driver, as you can see, and it is not by chance that his name is Michael, and Michael is head of the army of angels. Yes, so he's an angel, so he'll take us safely to the boat. On your left, you see the buildings of the nunnery. We have a functioning nunnery in the city, the nunnery of Our Lady of Kazan. It was founded in the 17th century, and of course in the Soviet time the communists closed the nunnery. Now it is open again. And today in this city we have all kinds of churches, all kinds of religious groups, because today we have really freedom of religion. For example, we have approximately 35 active Russian Orthodox churches. There is a synagogue, a small Jewish community in this city. There is a mosque, because we have quite a lot of Islamic people in this city. We have many Protestant churches of different denominations, because especially American, but also European missionaries are very active in this city. For example, there is a Methodist church, a Lutheran church, a Baptist church, the Church of the Moon. Well, freedom of religion. And 70%, more than half of people in Yaroslavl say they are believers, but only 10% are regular church goers, and most come to church, as people say, to be hatched, matched and dispatched. Or some people say C and E people only come for Christmas and Easter. Yes, C and E people, yes. Well, but there is freedom of religion. In the front window, ladies and gentlemen, you can see Church of Prophet Elijah, our last place to visit. The church was constructed in 1650, and in 100 years, Catherine the Great, greatest Russian empress, came to Yaroslavl, and she liked this church so much that she ordered that all the buildings around the church should be pulled down, and the central square of Yaroslavl should be constructed around this church. Now you'll see the central square and the church. And ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to take pictures inside very beautiful frescoes, please pay 100 rubles, buy special photo video license. You can buy it from the lady at the cash desk. She'll be on your left as you enter the church. We'll spend here about quarter of an hour. It will be a very brief visit, and then we'll return to the bus and to the boat. And while visiting the church, let us again divide into two groups. So remember, left side, well, and right side. So let us go and sit.
Oh,
1,000 pil of the Russian Federation. Everyone holds it, but nobody can expect. So we've passed by this statue to Yaroslav the Wise, then the White Chapel in honor of liberation of Moscow in 1612. And
between 1818 and 1858. So 40 years it took them to build it. And 500,000 people took part in the construction of the cathedral. 300 kilograms of gold were used inside for the decoration and 100 for the dome. So the name St. Isaac's comes from, it was a name of a Christian of the 4th century, St. Isaac. The thing is that the first little church that was opened on the 30th of May in the times of Peter the Great was opened on birthday of Peter the Great. 30th of May, that was birthday of Peter the Great and the day of St. Isaac. This is not a very popular saint, but since it was birthday of Peter the Great, they gave the name to that little church, and this is the 4th church that has the name of St. Isaac's. Well, the first stop here is a model of a scaffolding. Well, of course, you were all impressed by those huge columns that we saw outside. Each of them is around, well, the bottom ones, 17 meters high, and they are one piece. All in all, there are 112 columns decorating the exterior of the cathedral. So, one piece, 17 meters high, the weight was over 100 tons. Can you imagine in the middle of the 19th century, how did they lift the columns? Special scaffolding was built for that purpose. So what they did, first of all, the granite was found so far from Finland, where the Russian granite was. They were cut huge pieces of stone. The structure of the Russian support by the oil. They were transferred to the quality. Then, they found the scaffolding. What is the one thing is much more steep compared to the other. Because there is no one who could have was much more. The column was put inside, wrapped in fabric, and some ropes were attached to it. The ropes were then attached to some wheels. You can see the models on the side that are called captains. 8 people were turning the wheels, 8 wheels, at the same time. All in all, 128 people were working at the same moment. And they managed to lift one column only in 45 minutes. Less than an hour, but of course preparation decoration work was very long. So on the whole, for all the columns to be put up, it took them 2 years. Well, one of the impressive things on the outside were the columns, and you all noticed a dome, the dome. It's not possible not to notice it. So here is a model of the dome. That was a very unusual dome also, like the columns are very unusual. So the dome consists of 3 parts: spheric, conic, and parabolic. A very new technique for the time. Metal ribs. Before that, the domes were made of bricks. And you can imagine, when a dome is made of bricks, it's much, much heavier. Metal ribs make it lighter. So the cathedral is very big, and it's really hard to heat it. Because there are some heaters are hidden under the floor. But also, for the heating, there were some clay pots used. That's an ancient Russian method. So the cathedral is a combination of brand new techniques for that time and ancient methods. Between the 2 domes, inside domes of the dome, there were 100,000 clay pots put for thermal isolation, to keep it warm, and also for the acoustics. So it's very good acoustics in this cathedral as well. Middle of the 19th century, when they started building it, they wanted to make it the main church. So you remember that the first main church of St. Petersburg was Petrodvorets Cathedral that we already visited. But the city kept growing, and by the 19th century, already by the end of the 18th century, they realized that that church is not grand enough, and they started the construction of this one. Well, one more thing about the dome before we start moving. You saw that gold on top. This is the original gold that you saw outside. It has never been regilded, because a very unusual technique, another technique was used for gilding of the dome. It's called gilding on open fire. What they did, there is a special amalgam in nature, gold and mercury together. They covered metal sheets with that amalgam, put it on open fire. Mercury evaporated, gold welded into the metal. And they did it 3 times. Every sheet was signed by the master who did it. But you can imagine how dangerous are the mercury vapors for people's health. They say minimum 60 people died doing that. But the gold stays almost forever. Another thing, that thanks to the dome, the cathedral was never bombed. They used the dome of the Azov's cathedral as a landmark. The Nazis knew where to bomb, looking at the dome of the cathedral. This is why some treasures from the suburban palaces were kept in the basement of this cathedral during the Second World War. Like the doors. This is oak and bronze. It's 3 types of relief here: high, middle, and low. And the idea was borrowed from Florence, from the Golden Book. This is our version. They show some scenes from the history of Russia and some scenes from the history of Christianity. But over there you saw a bust. You can see it from here. This is the bust of Montferrat, the architect of the cathedral. When you look at the cathedral from the outside, as well as the inside, again, it's not a typical Russian church. Montferrat was a Catholic, so it looks more like a Roman Catholic cathedral, doesn't it? Montferrat was a French man who came to Russia, and this is the most famous work by him. So he was not famous at all when he received this commission. Can you imagine the main cathedral of Russia? The commission is given to an unknown architect. Why did it happen? As I mentioned, there were several churches that had the name of St. Island. On the place of this very church, in the end of the 18th century, Catherine II decided to found the Artemis Cathedral. I said that the Petrodvorets Cathedral was not big enough for the Roman Cathedral. But when Catherine II died, it was built only up to the cornice. The idea was to have a grand cathedral with 5 turrets. Paul I became the next Tsar. He liked to do everything contrary from what Martin would like to do. So he took all the marble away on the construction of his palace, and instead of 5 turrets, they hastily finished it and made an ugly turret. Alexander I, son of Paul I, already realized that was not good enough, and he started a contest project. His idea was to have the the artist started to create a new but he wanted to do this the previous church. Why? Well, and another little thing here is a model of the cathedral, which is 166 times smaller than natural size. It was made in the 19th century by a peasant whose name was Maxim Salin. He made it with no nails. And they say that this beautiful model was on the desk of Montferrat in his study, and he even checked with some of the details and was inspired to work. For creation of this church, Maxim Salin received freedom because it was still serfdom in Russia at that time. And even when he grew old, he received a pension from the government. Well, I asked you to have a look at that painting so that you can compare. That was a painting there on a pylon, and here's the same resurrection of Jesus Christ, but it's a mosaic. They built it as the main church of St Petersburg, and they wanted it to be immortal. But the cathedral is huge. Humidity, cold, the paintings started to deteriorate, and they decided to replace the paintings with mosaics, because mosaics last much longer. They never completed this work because the revolution started, so the Soviet Union was established, and it never happened. But some of the paintings were still replaced by mosaics. This is one of the mosaics here, made by Russian artists. We had art of the mosaics in the ancient times, but then it was lost, and it was revived again only in the 18th century. For 1 square meter of mosaics, it took one master around the year. So it's a really time-taking job. They used to make from 12,000 to 15,000 shades and colors. And you can see, even look at any face here, you will see that every single piece of small toe is different. So it's time-taking job of matching it to look like just like painting. Let's go. As I said, some of the paintings are not paintings but mosaics. Have a look up above your heads, the triangles with four evangelists. These are mosaics. The squares under the triangles with passions of Christ. These are mosaics as well. Everything else in the interior here is paintings. As I said, they never finished this job. And we are in the very center of the cathedral. Above our heads is the beautiful dome. The dome is 800 square meters. It was painted by, well, you can hardly tell that it's so big. The painter who painted it was Brulov. He was a Russian painter. When he received the commission, he was saying it's the same as painting the sky. He was seated up above there on a swing, kind of, and he was painting the dome. This cathedral took many lives away. Well, Montferrat, some workers who were gilding the dome, many others. As for Brulov, the cathedral was not finished. There were drafts there. There was windy, and the marble was polished, so the dust was going up. And finally, he got a very terrible lung disease. He didn't even finish. He didn't even complete the dome. He moved to Italy, where he died in a year. Another painter had to finish the dome for him. The name of the dome is Madonna in Glory. In the center, you can see an opening with a dove. It's over 80 meters from here. The dove is symbol of the Holy Spirit. It looks like a white bird. Actually, it's silver. So the silver is sprinkled on top of it, and it looks as if it's white. In the Soviet time, the church was not a church here. There was a museum of history of religion and atheism, and there was a pendulum here. The pendulum moved and proved the fact that Earth rotated. It was one of the main pieces of the collection of that museum of atheists. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, they took the pendulum away and they put the dove back on top there. The dove is hollow inside. As well as the sculptures decorating the interior. Look at the sculptures. Can you imagine how heavy they could be if they were not hollow? That was another brand new technique for the 19th century, called galvanoplasty. They made a mold, covered it with bronze, metal and gold. Then with the help of water and electricity, I'm not very good at physics, but somehow they managed to melt the mold inside, and the statues are columns. Each of them is not more than 80 kilos. This is That's how they managed to put so many sculptures in design. What you look at is probably the columns. The big ones are made of malachite, green ones. This is malachite. Each column is 10 meters high. They are columns.
Hollow.
Malachite doesn't come in big pieces. It comes as part of a rock, and they have to take it out of the rock, and then they take small pieces of malachite, put it together, carefully polish it, and it gives the impression of being solid, but it's not. As for the blue columns, they are solid. Each of them is 5 meters high, and they are made from lateral brought here from Afghanistan. So the icon stand, it has 3 tiers. The first 2 tiers are mosaics. The third tier, the centerpiece, the Last Supper, is a mosaic. The rest are paintings, imitation of mosaics. So to the left is Madonna and Child, Jesus Christ. Something very typical for a Russian Orthodox church. But the other saints in the first tier are the saints to the left there, a woman, Saint Catherine, Catherine II, Saint Alexander, Alexander I, the wife of Montfort, Saint Isaac, to the right from Jesus Christ. You can see he's holding against the sketch of the cathedral after whom the church is named. And then St. Nicholas, Nicholas I, during whose reign the cathedral was finished. The second row, the saints who have the same names as the members of the royal family. And the third row, Old Testament prophets. And of course, what attracted your attention probably was a beautiful stained glass window. It's something that you don't find in Russian churches at all. They received a special permission from the Russian Tsar to have a stained glass window in front. It's something that you find in Catholic Church. This is so beautiful, he gave that permission. Of course, it was not made in Russia, it was made in Munich. It's almost 30 square meters. And probably you have that question if it's a functioning church or not. It's a museum, but to the left, over there is an arch. Under the arch there is a chapel. It's a functioning chapel and they give services there.
Is there any likelihood that the architect could be moved back in various years?
They haven't been talking about that,
No,
so
but-
very unlikely. Very unlikely. I don't think so.
Is that lapis too, the little squares and then on top the arm?
Yeah. The blue is lapis lazuli. Okay, let's look. So I'll remind you that the church was built in the times of the Tsars. Then 1917, when the Great October Revolution happened, it was closed as a church and the museum was opened. What was here in the Second World War, I already mentioned. That the dome of the cathedral was used as orientation for the Nazis to know where to bomb. This is why the cathedral was not damaged at all by the bombs. Of course, it was damaged by the humidity and the cold because it was not heated during the siege of Leningrad. But there were no direct explosions here. Probably the Russians could predict that. This is why the treasures, as I said, from some of the suburban museums were kept under the floor in the basement.